Maggie.
Sarah, apologies if you answered this yesterday, but is the president aware?
It's okay. Everybody here likes to ask the same question many times.
Is the president aware that Steve Bannon described firing James Comey as the biggest mistake in modern political history?
Whether he is or not, I think that everybody knows exactly where the president stands on that issue. The president is proud of the decision that he made. The president was 100% right in firing James Comey. He knew at the time that it could be bad for him politically, but he also knew and felt he had an obligation to do what was right and do what was right for the American people and certainly the men and women at the FBI. I think there's no secret. Comey, by his own self-admission, leaked privileged government information. Weeks before President Trump fired him, Comey testified that an FBI agent engaged in the same practice, they'd face serious repercussions. I think he set his own stage for himself on that front. His actions were improper and likely could have been illegal. Comey leaked memos to the New York Times, your own outlet. He politicized an investigation by signaling he would exonerate Hillary Clinton before he ever interviewed her or other key witnesses. He's very happy with the decision he made, and I think he's been fully vindicated by a lot of those new things and knowing that it was the right one. Callie.
Thanks. I have two. Let me just follow up too. You said that the actions of James Comey could have been illegal. You the other day referred to potential false testimony. The DOJ is not commenting, but I would put to you, would the president encourage the DOJ to prosecute Comey?
That's not the president's role. That's the job of the Department of Justice, and something they should certainly look at.
Is that something you'd like to see?
I'm not sure about that specifically, but I think if there's ever a moment where we feel someone's broken the law, particularly if they're the head of the FBI, I think that's something that certainly should be looked at.
And on North Korea, I'm sorry, my second question on North Korea, is this administration determined whether North Korea did test a hydrogen bomb?
We haven't released those details yet.
Has the assessment been made though?
I'm not sure, Hallie.
Thank you, Sarah. Yesterday when you were talking about James Comey, you mentioned that he gave false testimony. Didn't hear you say that again today. Do you still stand by that?
I did say that actually
You did
today.
say, okay.
Yeah. And he did.
Sorry, separately, when it comes to Steve Bannon, the Wall Street Journal reported that they spoke the other night. That's what Steve Bannon told the gathering in Hong Kong. Do you know if they discussed the 60 Minutes interview, and has the president said that it's something he would like to discuss with Steve Bannon?
He hasn't said whether he'd like to discuss that, at least not to me on that front. James?
Sir, on North Korea, what did the president mean today when he said that the latest UN sanctions resolution was not a big deal?
I think he actually said this is a small step and part of the process. But look, I think that the ultimate goal here is a denuclearized Korean peninsula. That's what we have to push towards. We're going to continue taking those small steps, but at the same time, we know that those very parties that voted to do this all have to do more. The president's called on them to do more, and we continue to hope that they will.
Is the president comfortable with his son, Donald Trump Jr., testifying publicly up on Capitol Hill?
I'm sorry?
Is the president comfortable with his son, Donald Trump Jr., testifying publicly up on Capitol Hill? Senator Feinstein has indicated that she'd like to see that happen. And separately, but on the same...
I think she said she'd just like to see him testify. Look, this administration's been very clear. We're going to be transparent and cooperative with this process. We know that there was nothing improper took place, no wrongdoing, and we're ready to see this come to its full conclusion and everybody else to see that as well.
So the president would be comfortable...
The president again
is
the president is comfortable with us being fully transparent and cooperating with this process, as we've done every day since it started, and will continue to do as we move forward.
And if I may just ask a quick little follow-up question, Jared Kushner, was there any discussion about him stepping aside earlier this year, leaving the administration?
No conversation that I'm aware of, and certainly no presentation, as both the president's attorneys have gone on record to say. David.
Yeah, Sarah, Mark Short also said today that I believe that administration would not tie funding for a border wall to some sort
I believe he actually said it would be premature to determine whether or not that would happen.
So what, I guess what I'm saying is it seemed to leave the impression that the administration would be open maybe to a bill for the DACA recipients that would legalize them without any other strings. Is that what you're saying?
I think what we're saying is what we've been saying all along. We haven't mixed messages here. We want responsible immigration reform. That hasn't changed. The president's very much committed to the wall. We're also committed to some other principles that we've laid out, and none of those have changed. Alex.
Last year on the campaign trail, the president said he wouldn't support amnesty. But last week he asked Congress to legalize DACA. So why the change of heart?
I think that the president has spoken out very clearly that he wants us to make this decision based on a variety of factors, but the number one thing is that he wants responsible immigration reform, and part of that is including that in the process. Trey?
Have to want responsible immigration reform.
I'm sorry?
What convinced them to want responsible immigration reform?
I think the president's always wanted responsible immigration reform, something that is important for the country moving forward, but he also wants to make sure American jobs are protected, American citizens are protected, and that's why it can't be just one piece but comprehensive. Trey?
Thanks, Sarah. Earlier you referenced two things about the former FBI Director James Comey. First, you said the leaking of information likely could have been illegal. You went on to say something that could be looked at. Are you encouraging, is this White House encouraging the Department of Justice to investigate the former FBI Director James Comey for leaking information?
No, as I told Hallie, this is anybody that breaks the law, whatever that process is that needs to be followed, should certainly be looked at. If they determine that that's the course of action to take, then they should certainly do that. But I'm not here to ever direct DOJ in the actions that they should take.
Follow up on an earlier question too. A lot of conversations here in Washington about the midterm elections in 2018. What role is the president looking to play in the 2018 elections? Will he be supporting specific candidates, and will he be using his support as leverage to have those members of Congress support his domestic agenda?
Look, I think the president is going to support the agenda and accomplishing things that help America, but in terms of specific elections and whether or not he's going to weigh in, as I've said to a couple of your colleagues already today, I'm not going to be able to weigh in from the podium on that.
Just for an understanding, how does the president receive and give calls from his cell phone during work? I mean, I know it sounds very trite and small, but there's been a lot of controversy about how the president is being handled, I guess, by General Kelly, and how he keeps certain people in, certain people out. And then you're hearing Steve Bannon say that he's had many calls, and you're saying that, well, he's talked to the president several times, and you're saying you're not aware of that. So it leads us to believe that it's this conversation, this phone thing. Could you talk to us about the use of his cell phone? Is this like during the day, after hours, or what? Because I mean, there have been stories about this cell phone use and people calling in.
There have been a lot of things that you guys have written that I've seen to be controversial. That one hasn't been something I've seen a whole lot about. But the president has access. I mean, he can make calls from a landline too. I'm not really sure what the question is here, whether or not he made a call from a cell phone or a landline.
From the White House, those calls are more so logged. You have a login time versus a cell phone. It's his personal phone, correct?
The president, again, I don't sit in on every single call he makes. I'm telling you about what I'm aware of at this point. Certainly we'll keep you posted, as we do with numerous calls that the president makes throughout the day and through the evening. Hunter?
Foreign propaganda.
Hunter?
Thank you. Does the president believe that he needs to secure funding for a border wall before DACA? And I also have a second quick question.
Again, I think it would be, as Mark Short said, and as your colleague pointed out, it would be premature for us to make those determinations at this point. But certainly something that we want to make sure happens is that there is a wall. That's something the president's committed to. But we also want comprehensive immigration reform. Blake?
Also, will the president be reading Hillary Clinton's book? And what does he think about the excerpts that have gotten out so far?
Whether or not he's going to read Hillary Clinton's book, I am not sure, but I would think that he's pretty well versed on what happened, and I think it's pretty clear to all of America. I think it's sad that after Hillary Clinton ran one of the most negative campaigns in history and lost, and the last chapter of her public life is going to be now defined by propping up book sales with false and reckless attacks, and I think that that's a sad way for her to continue this work.
Thank you, Sarah. I have two questions. First, the Treasury Secretary said this morning that Janet Yellen is being considered for reappointment as Fed chair. Is that something the president is considering? Is she on the short list? And how close is the president to making that decision?
When we have a personnel announcement, we'll certainly make sure everybody in the room knows.
I wanted to ask you about what the president said about North Korea earlier. He said that the UN Security Council resolution was nothing compared to what ultimately will have to happen. Is the president considering actions including cutting off Chinese banks from the U.S. financial system?
As we've said many times before, that all options are on the table. That hasn't changed. The president's also said that he wants every country involved to step up and do more. this was a small step in that process, and we're hoping that they'll all take a greater role and a more active role in putting pressure on North Korea.
A moment ago, you've used the language responsible immigration reform. A moment ago, you said comprehensive immigration reform.
I think the goal, again, responsible immigration reform, making sure that we have the principles that we've laid out and that I've laid out from up here accomplished in that package.
Not
So that's,
necessarily comprehensive as it had been talked about before.
yeah, responsible immigration reform. Blake?
Thanks, Sarah. Let's drill down on that a little bit, on the idea of Democrats coming across the aisle to support the president's tax reform. The question is whether there's enough of a shared vision between Democrats and Republicans for what tax reform ought to look like. So can you give us one or two examples of things, elements of this deal that the president could put into the deal that would attract those Democratic votes, but that would not alienate any Republicans? I mean,
These
what
are just
the
the beginning
specifics that you can do to this
conversations.
debate here?
These conversations are just starting with the Democrats coming to the table, and as those take place, we'll certainly provide more information on that front, but this is just the very beginning, the first step in this process. Thanks so much, guys. We'll be around the rest of the day to answer other questions if you have them. Thanks so much.
Propaganda in the U.S. on Facebook and social media.